In this lesson, we're going to talk about how I would set up a Photoshop project and how to create shortcuts in our menu within Photoshop. This is a time-saving step, and it should help make your projects more easily manageable. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so let's get started in Photoshop. What we're going to do first is make a new project. So I hit New or Control N. Now I don't name my projects here. So my width is going to be 9. And my height is going to be 11 or 11.5. In this case, 11 will be fine. My resolution, I'm going to make it 300 at least. And this way I don't have to worry about forgetting that I have a low res palette that I'm working with. All right. So we're okay here. The next thing I want to do is activate that layer, make it a live layer by double clicking and click OK. All right, so now I have my project, I'm set up, I'm ready to go. So let's just grab an airbrush and as my tool, and I'm going to throw a couple of these actions I have created in the garbage. Actions are very, very important in your workflow and allowing you to move quickly through Photoshop. So we're going to make some preset actions that should always stay saved within your project. You can see that my actions right here under my window tab, or I can just go directly to the palette if you have the palette open. And let's name the first one Blur. Let's name it Blur Master. All right, we'll make one big folder and we'll put all of the actions inside. So our folder is there and you can see that it's named. Now I'm going to click this icon, which will actually let me create an action. So I'm going to name this one as G Blur is for Gaussian Blur. And I'm going to set my shortcut to F11. So throughout the project, you'll hear me say I'm hitting F11. That's in reference to my Gaussian blur. So you'll see that my shift and my control aren't checked. So that means it's not used already. Everything's ready to go. I'm going to click record. All right. So now what's happening is everything that I do, when I see that red button activated, it means that Photoshop is recording the steps that I take. All right, so that matters. Make sure that it's on. You see that red dot in order to record your steps. If you don't see the red dot, if it's not activated, it won't work. All right, so you can see that I have a line here. Just wanted to draw a line out. Let's put it on a new layer instead of the background layer. And I'm going to just drive my stroke right across the paper. Right. So what we're doing is we're creating just something so that you can see how the Gaussian blur is going to work as we use the filter. All right, and then as I said earlier, this will allow us to move through Photoshop in a much faster manner, just having these shortcuts set. So let's go to filter, and we go to blur, and we're going to go to Gaussian blur. All right. So this is the one that I use more often than not. And let's move this so we can just see the edge of the stroke. And you can see how much it blurs here. So 5.9 is okay. Let's jump to 10. 10 is pretty intense, right? It'll give me a nice blend. So let's see. Now, if I were to go up higher, that's too much. That's too much of a transition. So we'd rather have too little of a transition. And we can repeatedly hit F11, 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 and build on our blur. As we get in the project, you'll see that I do that and I use it in that manner. So in this case, always remember that less is more. So 10 should work pretty well for us here. Shouldn't be a problem. So let's click OK. And so you can see there's a nice blur, nice and subtle there. All right. So that's what I want to do with this tool. So I'm going to go ahead and set this up to record. I undid the action. I'm going to go, instead of clicking Gaussian blur here, I'm going to drop into my blur options, and I'm going to go to Gaussian blur. And there we go. So 10 is the set. We agree that 10 is a good start. And so now the blur is there. And if you notice, you see there's a new tab in the folder that says Gaussian blur. So if I stop, now, anytime I hit F11, it's going to continue to blur, and you can actually see it run in the Actions tab. And it becomes more blurry, and I can speed up my F11 tab, right, by just hitting repeatedly. All right. So let's go ahead and let's create a secondary blur. So we'll say big blur. And we'll make this guy F12. Just make it an orange color and click record. All right, so now we have a new record, and I'm going to go to blur, Gaussian blur. And if you want to use another blur, feel free to explore and see which blurs work best for you. So I'm going to really push this one. Somewhere about 146, 150 will work for this. And now I'm going to stop. Now, if you do anything afterwards, if you were to take and create a new stroke, or, well, that won't work, but let's say lasso tool, it adds to the record. And so we want to be very careful that we're not adding extra steps to our action. So if you click stop, you can throw that away. Bam, it's in the garbage. We don't have it there anymore. And now we're back to normal. All right, so we have a Gaussian blur 1 and we have a big blur. Now you can make quite a few different actions and just build them up and save them. And whenever you load Photoshop, they should still be there as long as you have the current version and you're saving your workspace. So keep that in mind and make sure that you're conscious of if your record is set or if it's off. And you should be fine. And you can see the numbers just in case you forget. I have mine set to F11, F12. Normally I set them to F6 and F5. So I'm going to save this workspace if I don't have it saved. But let's go to our keyboards and shortcuts. And this is another tool that'll save us a little time as we're working. So when I work, I often have a lot of layers in my projects. Now, when I have a lot of layers, I don't take the time to name the layers because I do a lot of combining and merging. So in this project, you're going to see that I don't take time to name the layers. I really want to move quickly, and in this case, sloppily. Now, if I'm working with a client who needs the Photoshop file to be organized, that's a different story. If I'm working with coworkers who I'm passing a file to, then I'm certainly going to go in and name the layers properly. So right now I have these layers selected and I'm going to go convert to smart object. Now what happens is Photoshop is now combined all of those layers into one place. If I were to double click that layer, if I just double click that icon, what happens is it opens it in Photoshop as a new tab. So you see it says layer 5.psb. And each of those layers are now active layers that can be manipulated and changed very easily. So when we're talking about digital painting, let's do a little color change here. Click OK. This is a very helpful tool. So now we're going to just hit Control, Save, and we're going to go back to our original and look, we've updated the color. Very easily. It's not a hard process, but it'll save you a ton of time and it gives you control. And if you ever make a mistake, the response isn't, oh, I have to start all over. We can just go into that file and update those individual layers. Now, the next tool that we're going to talk about is the rasterizing the layer. And what that means, what we would use that once we were done. Let's go over here and talk about. Let's go to our workspace and go back to our keyboards and shortcuts. What we'll do first is let's go to the file, and keyboards and shortcuts is also found here. Let's go to our menus, and that's where our menus are, but we need the keyboard shortcuts for our layer. So I'm going to select my layer tab here, and I'm going to scroll through and look for the ones that I'm going to use. And the one I want to use first is to convert to a smart object. So let's look and see. Here it is. So we see the smart object, and you can see that I already have my shortcut loaded, and I have it as Shift and F1. So what I'm going to do is pretend that I don't, for the sake of this tutorial, and it gives me an error message that says, hey, Shift F1 is already assigned to a layer tool, smart object, convert to smart object. So it gives me an area. I can leave it alone in this case, but I can just click accept and we're okay. Let's see what else I might want to set up as a shortcut. Rasterize. So these two we're definitely going to use. So I'm going to hit this and save it as Shift and F2. And Photoshop tells me this is an action which will override the command. I want to click accept. And so now I have two of the shortcuts that I'm going to use quite a bit throughout the project as a part of my layer organization process. Now, let's see. So we have a couple layers here. Let's go ahead and select a few, and we're going to merge them into one. Now, once I've established that this is good, this is what I want, I hit Shift F1 and I group them. And so let's say that everything is okay with the layers. I'm done with this part of the painting. I don't want to just make a huge Photoshop file. What I can do is then hit Shift and F2 to rasterize this and turn this into a regular layer. So now I hit Shift F2, it's just a regular layer. And now I can name this layer pink if I want to and save it. Now we're good to go. So now in this case, I want to drop this into groups. So you'll see me do this later on. When I have certain segments together, maybe if I'm working on eyes, I'm going to put the eyes in a folder. And those layers may not be named, but they'll be inside of a folder called eyes. Now, if you want to take the time and name each one, you can. So if you have a Creative Cloud, let's talk about the libraries. If you don't have a Creative Cloud, don't worry about this. But the library is an amazing tool. It allows you to create different folders that will house smart objects, PNGs, or samples of artwork that you continuously use, color combinations. Let's go ahead and drag this and drop this here. And this is really good for time saving. So I don't have to go into the bridge or go into a folder and find an object over and over again. I can just jump right here in my library. Let's grab this eye. This is probably cut better. There we go. I can drop that down. Let's grab this one here and drop it down. There we go. And so now I'll have access to all of the symbols or smart objects that I saved in a project, and I'll be able to use them whenever I want to. I can even, as you see my colors are saved from a specific project, which makes things a lot easier while working. So if you have access to the library, if you have the new Creative Cloud, it's a really good tool to use. So here I am just selecting my color, and I can save that blue if I want into, or this pink, and just simply go and click this box here. And now it saves the color. It gives me the color code. And that's really helpful if you're going to go into other programs too. And anytime that I'm creating something I need consistency in the color, instead of having to go to the eyedrop and grabbing the original file, I just store all of that information here in my library. So if you have the Creative Cloud, if you have if you have access to this, don't hesitate to use it. In the next lesson, you're going to see that I have a different setup in Photoshop, and that is designed for me. So you can see in my workspace, I have different setups for different processes that I use. If you want to, feel free to set yours up and work along. So you'll see that everything's going to be on my left-hand side as we move forward, but don't let that freak you out. It's only because I'm left-handed. All right, so let's get started with the next lesson.